Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Taco Society Presents. I'm here with Leigh.
Hey.
Phil Perron.
How's it going?
Welcome back, guys.
Welcome back.
Yeah, and this is 2 weeks in a row for you.
It is. I'm on a
Well,
roll.
two months in a row.
That's right, 2 months in a row.
And
Yeah,
speaking of months, this is October, Halloween month.
it is. And
Our
there's
favorite month.
it
of
is.
the year.
Yeah, I think I said somewhere that for a horror writer, Halloween is our Christmas. You know, we
There
look
you go.
all
True.
year long, look forward all year long for Halloween, and it's here.
It is.
It
And,
is.
and like last year, this year we have a big event coming up, October 22nd,
Yep.
which is this Saturday. And depending on when this airs, it might be after the event. But it's called the Merrimack Valley Halloween Book Fest. And at least two of us, I don't know if you're going to show
Yeah,
up or
I'm not going to be able to make it.
not. Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
We're going to miss you.
Thank you.
But Phil and myself will be there representing the New England Horror Writers Association
And the
Cool.
Taco Society.
and the Taco Society.
I actually am sharing a table with a old fellow named Gardner Goldsmith.
Oh, are you really? You
yeah,
and Gard,
yeah,
huh?
yeah, fellow Taco Society alumni.
Yeah.
Alumni,
That's right.
Yeah. I think I'm sharing a table with Greg Bastianelli.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so
Excellent.
he's a friend of the show. He's been
yeah,
on before.
He's been interviewed.
Yeah. There's going to be 35 horror authors, which is a huge amount of horror authors in one place.
Yeah.
And some of them, New York Times bestsellers, others huge bestsellers on other lists. You've got a lot of big profile names. Chris Golden, Jim Moore, Bracken McLeod. Brian Keene will be there. A lot of big names, including two of our guests this evening.
That's right.
Yeah, Trisha Wooldridge
Yep, that's
and
right.
Doug Wynne will also be there. And one other thing I'll mention about it is, if you do go, there'll be a lot of event-only books. The limited editions, anywhere from 20, and I think Trisha's going to talk about hers. She's going to bring some, but anywhere from 20 to 100 copies. So if you don't go to the event, if you see this in time and you don't go, you're going to really miss out on some pretty special books.
Yeah, but next month we'll discuss how it went.
We will, yes. Yeah, we'll have some great stories, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're doing a panel.
Yes, I'm on.
Oh,
Yes,
right,
yeah, I'm a
right.
moderator on a panel
Yeah.
on New England horror.
Nice.
So that'll be fun. We were talking earlier. I've done a lot of research on it, and it should be very entertaining.
Oh,
And-
yeah. Any time that Scott Godsworth is on it, especially since he wrote the book about nonfiction ghosts in New England, it's just fantastic.
He should be a treasure trove of information.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Looking forward to that. And John McElveen will be on it. And why did I say his name wrong? I said it a million times.
Your table host.
My table
co-host.
host. My co-host, yes. Who else is on that? Kristen Dearborn.
That's
Kristen
right.
Dearborn, Greg, myself, and Scott. Yeah. So it should be, and John. It should be a heck of a good panel.
And this is at the Haverhill Library?
Haverhill
Oh,
Library.
yeah, Haverhill, Massachusetts Library. That's right. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a little bit of news here also. Bracken McLeod's release of Stranded. His book release was at Barnes & Noble in Framingham, Mass. That went over very well. It was very well attended. He sold an awful lot of books, and that was a lot of
Great.
fun. And coming up on October 28th, our guest is going to have his book release party, and you're going to be talking to him about that. Yeah, Doug Wynne. Black January?
Black January, yes, which is the sequel to Red Equinox.
Great, yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing Doug talk about his book.
Tony, me and you did something at the Tewksbury, Massachusetts
We
Library.
did, yeah. Was it last weekend?
2
weekends ago, yeah. And we'll be doing a lot of little things coming up over the next couple months. December 10th is another one in Haverhill with Haverhill at the Haverhill Library again, and John McElveen's putting that one together.
Lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, and there's another one, Buttonhole Library. I'm not sure. I can't remember the dates, but by the next show I should be able to. Oh, I think it's October 31st, and that's in Shrewsbury, if I remember right, or Tewksbury, one of the two.
Oh, on a Monday. Oh.
No, it's not a Monday.
Okay, then it's not October
Okay,
31st.
this is
then.
terrible. I should have wrote it down, but that's coming up also. So we'll be here and there, and we'll try to get you the dates to those. And just to wrap this up, we're going to talk a little bit about some friends of ours that we want to remember now. And one of them is Dennis Cummings, who passed away, I guess it was yesterday. It would be the 18th, October 18th, of lung cancer. And Dennis was more than anything else, if you know anything about Dennis, he was a Beatle fan. He actually fronted or was part of a band called Beatles for Sale that did Beatle tribute songs. And he played all over New England.
But is he a writer?
No, but he's an editor.
Editor.
Yeah, he did work on editors. I shouldn't say he's not a writer. He may have written, but we never talked. It's funny, we never talked about writing.
I didn't know him.
Yeah, we talked about a lot of things, but writing really never came up. And he was an Econ regular for the longest time. So
And Econ's the big genre fiction conference in Rhode Island.
every July, yeah. So our
that's too
condolences to
bad.
his family
Yeah.
and to his friends. And you also are going to note some passing.
Yeah, 2 movie directors, as a matter of fact, within the past month. Pretty big ones. Herschel Gordon Lewis,
Oh, yeah.
well known for a number of films, including Blood Feast. He just passed. An old timer, so he did well. And then Ted V. Mickles, who's another director from the same period, 60s and 70s, that had a number of horror films, and he just passed
He
as well.
passed.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ed
Couple-
Gorman also passed away recently. Did you know of
Yeah.
Ed? Yeah, and that was pretty sad. Very well known in the thriller genre. So,
And was that for writing or for films?
writing. Yes,
Okay.
writing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And you have somebody you want to say at least shout out to?
Yeah, I have a friend who's very ill, and I've been spending a lot of time with him, and I wish that I could be there with him today, but I can't, so I wanted to just say, hey, Jay, I'm thinking about you, and I can't be there with you tonight because I'm here with these guys, but I will see you tomorrow, and everybody's pulling for you and sending you prayers and good thoughts, so I love you.
Great.
Well said.
Yes, well said, and we wish you well, Jay.
One last thing I wanted to mention was just Rock and Shock. It was a
That's right,
big
yes.
convention that just happened in Worcester, Massachusetts, that one of our guests was actually at. Trish Wooldridge was there, and her husband Scott, as well as a number of other New England horror writers, including Scott Goldsworth, Ogmius, the artist and comic book writer, Glenn Rolfe from Maine, Ken Vaughn, Rob Smales, who was a guest just recently, Eric Nunnally, Rich Feltelberg, Bracken McLeod, Patrick Lacey, Adam Cesar, Joe Netta, Jeff Deck, D.B. Poirier, and Jack Haringa.
Yep. And Rock and Shock is the biggest convention for movie and horror literature in New England, I believe.
Yes, it is. And it's one of the biggest 15 in the country.
In the country, yeah.
So.
Well, great. Well, we're going to be right back with our guests, and thank you for listening to us go on a little bit too long today, but thank you for listening, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're here with our guest, Trisha Wooldridge.
Yes.
I've been having a problem leaving the D out of her name, so she's making fun of me a little earlier today. She's correcting me a little earlier today.
You and half the population of the
Yeah,
world.
I'm sure I wasn't the only one. Trish writes grown-up horror stories and weird poetry for anthologies and magazines. Some of them have even won awards. Under her business name, A Novel Friend,
Yep.
and that's at anovelfriend.com. She's edited over 50 novels, written over 100 articles on food, drink, entertainment, horses, and music. She's written for over a dozen different publications, designed and written 3 online college classes, copy edited and correct me if I do this wrong, the MMORPG Dungeons and Dragons Stormreach.
Yep.
Is Stormreach the name of a?
It's the world that the MMORG plays in.
Okay, gotcha. She's also edited 2 geeky anthologies and has become the events coordinator for Annie's Bookstop in Worcester. That's a great place. I've been
It
there.
is, yeah.
I've gone there for a few things. Because she's masochistic when it comes to time management, she's also created the child-friendly persona of T.J. Wooldridge and has written 3 scary children's novels. Welcome to the TACOsociety Presents.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You're Phil's guest. Yeah.
Thank you, Phil.
Trish, welcome. I'm glad that you were able to make it, and this will be the second out of 3 times I'll see you in less than a week.
Awesome.
Yeah, because we're Rock and Shock here, and then the Halloween
Merrimack,
Merrimack Valley. Yeah.
So excited about that too.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yes.
So we got some questions for you, me and Tony do, and let's start out with one that has always bothered me, and that is urban fantasy and dark fantasy. I was actually corrected that they're actually different, and I don't even know what either are.
Okay.
And I was curious. I mean, I've heard that Laurel K. Hamilton and True Blood are similar to that, but
Yeah.
you supposedly write in one or both. Could you explain
I
what
do
they
both.
are?
So, urban fantasy is almost a subset of dark fantasy. So, let me explain urban fantasy first, because it's easier to explain. Urban fantasy, the key to it is the urban setting. So, the city it takes place in, the location, the setting is almost like a character in this. A lot of books that border on noir end up being urban fantasy. And they tend to border on fantasy and horror because they usually have like monsters, secret societies, vampires hiding in the shadows, dark fae living between
This is
buildings in New
urban
York.
fantasy?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So that's urban fantasy. So the big important part of urban fantasy is it's in an urban setting in either modern times or sometimes slightly further back, like noir. Victorian is on the border on that, but more like the noir, the detective, a lot of that ends up being almost urban fantasy
30s,
as well.
40s noir.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's urban fantasy. Dark fantasy is any fantasy that has a lot of horror elements. And at either last Nikon or the Nikon before, we had a really good discussion on what's horror. Horror is a genre, but horror is also like a flavor to writing. It's the emotion that this writing elicits. So when you have dark fantasy, it's fantasy that also breeds this sense of horror, of fear, that tests your bravery and makes you have those cathartic or empathetic or frightening senses that a horror novel would. So you can have dark fantasy set in an epic setting. Some could argue George R. R. Martin tends to border on dark fantasy with the large amounts of rape and murder and all that.
Would the focus be more on characterization then, and
No, the emotion.
action?
The
Emotion.
focus is on making you afraid and making you question your fears and what your comfort zones, which is how I feel horror works.
in urban fantasy doesn't do
It
that?
does do that too. That's why urban fantasy is more of a subset of dark fantasy.
I got you.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you can have dark fantasy in contemporary settings. More of the Victorian tends to be called dark fantasy. High fantasy is in secondary worlds. Places like that would be still dark
Gotcha.
fantasy, suburbs, and things like that.
That's a good question.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying that, because I know it's one of the most popular genres, both of them right now.
It is. Well, that and paranormal romance. Working at the bookstore. One of those fun things is, where do we shelf the books? So we do have an urban fantasy section. Dark fantasy, we can either put in urban fantasy if it fits there, or if it's not urban, we'll put it just on the fantasy shelves, or if it's even more horror or scary, we'll put it on the horror shelves. So dark fantasy can kind of fit into all those places.
Yeah, and that's the higher up.
Yeah.
And things are underneath it. And-
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Now, speaking of urban fantasy, dark fantasy, and you mentioned fae elements, fae elements meaning fairies. Most horror that me and Tony are probably familiar with is vampires, ghosts, zombies, things of that nature. But you use fairies and those type of fae creatures and stuff and so forth. So explain that and how they relate into this genre.
Fae are actually one of the oldest monsters. The stories of the Fae, ghosts are also quite old, but the stories of the Fae, of people who live in the realms in between, the others, have been around. If you look at Greek mythology, you've got these spirits, the fauns, that may or may not have humans' best interests at heart. They're capricious. They don't care about humans. At best, they might think humans are our pets. At worst, they actively seek to do harm to humans. So they're creatures that don't fit into other things, but they were a lot of the original monsters. When you look at the folklore and the myths that different cultures have, and a lot of people, and I do often use the Celtic fairy myths from the British Isles and the United Kingdom area, and also Western Europe. But if you look across the world, You've got spirit myths in Japan that could also work with the fae. If you think of the kitsune and fox spirits and some types of the oni, those would be like fae. If you look at Hawaii, actually currently, even in Hawaii, in insurance, there is a creature called a menehune, which is a type of fairy. And modern day insurance still has clauses protecting against acts of the menehune.
That's too funny.
So it's all the things that we were afraid of. And one of the ones I did a lot in Scotland is, for example, I visited Scotland for a while. There are water fairy in Scotland that actively seek to harm you. And these creatures, it's always wet and rainy in Scotland. There's hidden bogs. And you like step and all of a sudden you're up to your thigh in mud and it looks like it was a great green grass. Now if that was like a kid, they'd be sucked in and drowned.
Yeah.
And people wanted to know what happened to these children, so they had the stories of the fairies. In a lot of cases also, people still look back, children with autism at the time were said to be touched by the fae. And that explains
Supernatural
why
explanations
yes,
for physical problems.
exactly, and
yeah.
that's where the fae come from. It's a personification of that. Because it's the things that we can't explain, that we don't have power over, that's what makes it so scary. And the original term would be to call them the fair folk, because you wanted to be polite and all of that. And it's similar to when people talk about the devil and say Old Nick or himself. You don't want to mention them by name, because if they hear you, they might start some trouble.
We've got to move on.
Sorry.
Just a quick follow-up to that. So for you yourself and how you write it, are you doing it similar to like Arthur Machen would, or the Dunwich Horror from Lovecraft, or how do you do it in your literature with these fairies?
I took a lot of my time from like Mercedes Lackey, where you've got these creatures that are still working their way into humanity, and that was one of my first things. And also looking at the Greek myths, Roman myths, Celtic myths, where you have these other creatures that are that the humans are like kicking them out of their lands. The humans are messing with them, so they're messing back. So that's more where I take the stories of the fae.
Okay, Tony, you actually have some questions.
I do, yeah. We're all writers here. One of the things I'm really interested in how people write. Can you give us a little bit of an idea what your routine is?
I don't have I have a crappy routine. I break all the rules of having to write every day, write X amount of words every day. I write in fits and spurts. I will have like a 5,000 or a 7,000 word day, then I won't write for 2 or 3 days. And most of that is because I'm juggling deadlines with editing, stuff that needs to get done for the bookstore. Occasionally I want my house clean, at least clean enough where we don't have mold or something. And so I juggle with that. So I work whenever I can. So sometimes I'll have 20 minutes and I'll just bust out my little netbook and do what I can, or write a poem. So
How many drafts would you do on a story? Just take a short story.
A minimum of 3 to 5 drafts, oftentimes more, because I'll do my rough draft, I'll go over it once to twice, I'll give it to my beta readers, and then I'll go over it each time with the beta readers, and then it goes to an editor, and the editor has to give me feedback, and I have to change again.
I was just going to say, who edits you?
I have a couple of great editors. Like, obviously, if I'm in a part of an anthology, those would be the editors.
Yep.
But for anything that I've done indie or small press, I have Kelly Hashway is a great editor. She's edited me. Jennifer Alice Provost has edited me. Vicky Trifoni has edited me. I've had a lot of just really good editors in my life, and some come from the publishing houses I'm with, and others are just people I've hired.
We're running low on time. So
Sorry.
No, not at all.
Well, if that's the case, let me jump to an important question, because it's related to what you're going to read tonight, as well as I have a special copy of it at the upcoming Halloween festival in Haverhill. But there's a book called Tea with Mr. Fuzzy Pants, which you're actually holding. Now, it's a very strange name for any work.
Yes.
And with its catchy title and that pretty unique and cute cover.
Yes,
as
that's
well as
Lynn
a little,
Hanson. I want to give her props. I love that cover.
Yeah,
Lynn Hanson, great
Yes.
artist. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic work. My question is, tell us about it. Is it fantasy? And is it horror elements in it? What do we got?
The original idea that came to it is normally I have a character that talks to me. This one was an idea. I wanted a story that sounded like it was going to be supernatural and ended up not being supernatural. So it's not supernatural. It's all research stuff that could actually happen. And I like to tell people it's a story about poor parenting choices. It's a story about dealing with people with special needs. And when you have people making mistakes and all that's involved, awful things happen. I've been told that it's okay for kids to read, and it's written in the main character's, the 10-year-old's perspective. I would suggest any parents read it first before you share it with your children. That's just, I'm going to throw that out there.
Okay. Good.
So that's what it's about.
This is one of the event only.
Yes, I have it available in ebook, and it'll be available in ebook. But I only have 20 copies that I'll have available at the Merrimack Valley Halloween Book Fest that I will number and sell there. And once I've sold out of those hard copies, I'm not going to have any more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And is it? You mentioned younger folk could read it, but adults should check first. But so you write a lot of I guess middle age.
I do middle grade writing, and that's why I took the name T.J. Wooldridge. I wanted people to know it's T.J. Wooldridge. I'm pretty sure it's okay for your kids. If it's not T.J. Wooldridge, you should read it first.
Gotcha.
So that's why this is under Trisha J. Wooldridge.
Okay. I'm just I'll ask the last question, but it's going to be really quick.
Go right
We're
ahead.
running out of
Sorry.
time. Talk about support. Can you tell us? I'm a big member, and so is Phil of the New England Horror Writers Association. Just give us your thoughts.
I love it. The New England Horror Writers Association has been wonderful in my career. I've made a lot of really good friends. I get to go to conventions and conferences. I chat with a few of the members online. Like if we get stuck, I'm like, hey, are you online? I got applauded showing this character's being evil. And that very much helps in chatting. And when we have like this chance to talk shop at conventions or behind the scenes when we go out to lunch, it makes you feel like you're not alone, because most of my writing gets done between 10 o'clock at night and 3 in the morning. Strangely, a lot of people are online at that time who are horror authors, so
it's a resource as well as a way to promote yourself.
It is, and also we get a lot of information from people, so we can ask questions. So how's Create Space? How is this publisher?
Excellent.
Should I go with this publisher? And we're like, avoid that publisher at all costs, or no, this person's great. They pay me on time. Go with them.
But the main thing that you mentioned was that you got to meet a lot of folks. That's how I met you. That's how I got you to come to the show today.
Yes.
That's how I met Tony.
Yep.
Same way, and it's helped all of us a lot, and we've made some great friends, including yourself.
We're going to read.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. You got something for us.
I do, and this again it's from Mr. Fuzzy Pants. It's a little bit of the ways in. The main character again is 10 years old, and it's in first person, hers.
Okay.
So, you ready?
We are.
All right.
Yes.
How are you going to make Mr. Fuzzy Pants come back to life? I demanded at breakfast on Wednesday morning. Mercedes wasn't at the table yet, so I figured it was time for Dad to spill. I had patiently waited since Saturday night for him to let me in on some plan or trick that my sister was going to see. With an afternoon tea threatening any dad time for me since Thursday night, I'd just about lost my patience. I'm going to do some magic, he said matter-of-factly. I studied his face, awaiting some conspiratorial wink or something. Can I help? No, this is tricky. He wasn't meeting my eyes, and I didn't like it one bit. A spell? I repeated, emphasizing the disbelief in my voice. Yes. Dad, I helped you and Mom convince Misty that Santa and the Easter Bunny still exist. I know there's no real magic. He gave me a pointed look and glanced nervously at the entrance into the kitchen to make sure my sister hadn't overheard that. There is real magic. It's just not for children. I'm hardly a child. Dad was clearly amused by what I felt was a statement of fact. I gave him half credit for at least trying to hide his smile. Only half, though. I'm very adult for my age. My teachers say so, and definitely more adult than Misty, and she's 18. That's not very nice to say, Portia. My dad spoke softly, giving me a frown. I glowered at him. It's not nice to think the fact that I'm mature and helpful and smart is funny either. His lips twitched. I'm sorry, sweetie. Yes, you are mature for your age and very smart. Too smart sometimes. He reached across the table and tweaked my nose. I don't know what it is, but there's something about getting your nose tweaked or poked that makes you smile no matter how annoyed you are. As I tried to fight the smile, he explained, "This spell is something only one person can do. Can you please understand that?" I sighed, but nodded. "Good." He reached over and kissed me. "So where did you learn this magic?" I was still pretty sure there wasn't any actual magic involved, but I wanted to know what was going on. The phone started ringing, and I saw Dad narrow his eyes at it. He continued cutting up French toast for Mercedes. She liked it in small pieces and not hot. With each ring, he glared even more. Finally, the answering machine, yes, my family still has an old-fashioned answering machine, picked up, and it was Mr. Murray, again. "Hey, Hank, I was just going about picking up the Mustang. I know it's your morning off, so I figured you'd be free. And if you want any help with anything around the house, I might be able to help, so give me a call." Dad's chopping seemed to get even louder through the message. He snorted when it was done and went to pour himself another cup of coffee. When it was clear he must have forgotten about my question, I repeated myself, "So where did you learn the real magic for the tea party?" After another long pause, he finally muttered, "James helped me." "Uncle James? Who's in jail? Whose car Mr. Murray kept calling about?" I glanced at the answering machine. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him glare again in that direction. "Yes?" My dad's voice got an edge to it. The one I knew meant he didn't want me to ask any more questions.
Excellent.
Very good.
Very,
Thank
very
you.
good. Thank you. You've been an excellent guest. I wish we had more time.
Indeed.
Yeah. We went over as it was. I mean, we had another 2 or 3 questions
yeah.
more that we could have.
Never mind, other ones we would have just made up.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully you'll come back.
I would love to come back.
Yeah. This is.
So, yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
Oh, we'd love
No,
to.
it
have
was
you.
our honor to have you here.
Oh.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank
Yeah,
you very much.
thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, Trish,
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Yes.
Right.
Thank
And
you,
hi,
Trish.
Scott. your husband.
Hi,
And,
dear.
And we'll be right back in a minute. Thank you. We're back. Back with Doug. Doug Wynne.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome to the
Thanks for having me,
TACOsociety
guys.
Presents.
Hello, Doug.
Before we start, I'm going to read your bio, but before we start, we talked about Doug coming on the program a couple months ago.
At
And-
Nikon.
At Nikon. Well, and I said, "Sid, you got to pick a guest to come." And she said, "I want to get Doug Wynne." I said, "That's great. Nice guy, great guest." And I go, "What's one of the reasons you want to bring him?" And she says, "He's got rock star hair."
I did not.
You did too. And I never.
You
and I,
are dreaming. I never said that.
You did say it, and I thought that was so great, though, because he does. You
He
got
does,
rock-
Great.
but I
Great.
didn't say that, did I?
Yeah,
Well,
you did.
You broke out some Neil Young with me at Nikon.
Absolutely, yeah,
We
yeah.
had a
Did
rock
I
and roll
really
moment.
say that? I must have been on meds.
That's right. We did see some Neil Young, didn't we?
We did.
We talk about
had
Nikon
a big
a
old
lot.
sing-along.
We did. We had a good time.
I
we
want to
always
see
do.
that
The
message
one night we didn't
that
get
I
rained on,
sent
right?
you.
It was in person when you said it.
Oh,
You said
then
it
I
here.
don't trust you.
Oh, no. Hearsay.
Okay. Well, you do have nice
It was
hair.
because I like his writing.
Of course it was, but it was like an afterthought. You go, oh, and because he's got
Oh,
rock star.
okay.
Yeah,
All
that wasn't
right,
the only
Tony.
reason. No,
Okay.
no. Doug Wynne is the author of the novels The Devil of Echo Lake, Steel Breeze, Red Equinox, and his newest, Black January. He recently published in forthcoming his recently published and forthcoming short fiction includes stories in Dark Discoveries, the Lovecraft E-Zine, and the anthologies Tales from the Miskatonic Library, The Gods of H.P. Lovecraft, and I Am the Abyss. He lives in Massachusetts with his wife and son in a house full of animals just a stone's throw from the fictional town of Arkham. Welcome again to the show.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So, as a Berkeley grad, where, when, and how did your command of the craft develop? It's evident reading your work that you have a gift, and I assume you have a gift for music too. Do you think that's fair?
When I was playing in a band, I did go to music school and eventually became a recording engineer for a while. But when I was singing in a band, it was never the singing that got compliments. it was usually lyrics. So I think eventually I figured out that if I had a knack for anything, it was maybe putting words together. And I think that's just from being a lifelong reader. by the time I started writing seriously, and I had written when I was in my teens, when I was reading a lot of the horror fiction that still influences me, I just absorbed a lot of that, and by the time I got back to writing later in life, I think I just had absorbed enough of it to have an ear for it. I don't have a formal education in literature or in creative writing, but the best education, I think, is reading what you love.
Did I hear you right? Did you write for a while, then stop, and then start again later in life?
Right, I was seduced by the guitar.
And that took over for how many
like
years?
15, so
Wow.
so I had written a
Okay.
novel when I was I think 15. I had written a fantasy novel in high school, which is horrible, and I'm afraid to
The trunk
ever
story.
look at those notebooks. But I thought I would be a writer, and then I bought a 4-track recorder and ended up just becoming a songwriter for many years.
Is there any albums that we'd see with your
I hope
name on
not.
it?
So some of it, I have moments when I can be proud of moments from bands I was in or CDs that I made, and I think now when I do pick up a guitar on rare occasions,
You did a Nikon.
I might be a little better than I used to be because I'm more relaxed about it now that it's not something that I'm so invested in as
You can screw up and it won't bother you as much. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just-
I mean, I've got the writing front and center now, so music is more for fun, and I do have fun.
Good
with
for
it.
you, yeah.
So.
Well, at Nikon, you did a great job.
Thanks.
There was one of the evenings where you, Ogmius, and a few others, Larissa, were all playing guitars and singing.
Paul,
and-
we
yeah.
broke out the axes and had some
Oh, it was a
fun.
lot of fun, yeah. That was
time.
great.
Well, speaking of music, in another interview, you underscored the solitary nature of writing versus being in a band. And considering the genre in which you write and the trilogy you've taken on, do you ever find yourself having to fight from becoming reclusive at all, or do you have a healthy balance?
I think if anything, writing has made me more social. When you've got deadlines and projects, and I run a business also and have a third grader at home and animals, it can be hard to get out with your old friends, no doubt about it. But I'm really grateful that in the past year or so, I've realized what a vibrant community of genre fiction writers and editors and artists we have in New England, and have gotten to meet so many of you in person, and that's great about doing bookstore readings and signings. Every time I go out there with a new book, I get to make new friends, and that's been a real treat. So it's kind of gotten me out of my shell,
Good.
which is
Good for
nice.
you.
When you're
Good,
playing in a
yeah.
band, you kind of have instant audience
Response,
reaction.
yeah,
But
absolutely,
with this,
yeah.
we do it alone, and we hope that when you finally put it out there,
It's
you
appreciated,
get to
yeah.
connect with
Exactly,
people.
yeah.
So that's the fun part.
So Black January, which comes out on,
Friday. I'm not sure when you air this, but the 21st is the release date
okay.
for the book, and then the 22nd, day after Saturday, we're doing the Merrimack Valley Book Festival.
Okay, great. So Black January is a sequel to Red Equinox,
Right.
and the second book, which you
Of
could
the,
hold up,
right, second
Red
book in the trilogy called The Spectra Files.
Okay. So what are some of the challenges you've encountered in writing a series for the first time?
It was especially interesting, we'll say, that I knew I wanted to do a series. By the time I had finished writing Red Equinox, I knew the way I was ending the book left the door open and kind of hinted at or called for
Oh, so it wasn't planned.
more to happen. So I knew I could end it with Red Equinox, and it would come to a satisfying conclusion. Not a big cliffhanger, but there was certainly room for more. And yet I don't outline when I even write one book. I'm not exactly sure how it will end. I do some planning as I go. So thinking ahead to how will a series end? Where am I going to be in book 3? There were some images I had, things I knew I wanted to get to eventually, and still may or may not hit on all of them. But planting seeds in a book that was going to actually be published without knowing what those seeds would all necessarily grow into
Right.
has been a bit of a leap of faith.
Mm-hmm.
So on the other hand, it's been a lot of fun having a character that I can develop not just in one book, but
Yeah.
but in several. My main character, Becca Phillips, is a photographer. She's an urban explorer,
Mm-hmm.
and she also deals with seasonal affective disorder. She goes through bouts of depression
Mm-hmm.
and anxiety, and so in rising to the heroism that's demanded of her in the situation she finds herself in. It's fun for me to have a character who is on one level disabled and has these things that these demons both literal and
Yes,
figurative that she
yes,
has to
yeah,
deal with through the
yeah.
course of the series.
As a reader, I loved finding that out about her, and it just made her much more real to me and and appealing as a character.
Thank you.
So yeah.
You're writing a trilogy, and you've written a couple of books before that. Can you feel your writing improving? Can you feel it changing as you're, say, starting Black January? Do you sit back and go, wow, I've moved ahead so much since I started my first book? Or does it all feel the same?
I don't know. It can be hard to remember what it was like writing, a first novel. I think it comes easier. I think anything with practice comes easier. And that doesn't mean every day is a good day, or that you can always find the words. I would like to hope that I'm getting better at this, but I have different aims sometimes for different books and stories also. And while I do think I have developed a voice of my own, where most of us probably start out imitating the writers we love, I think I'm finding where my own voice is. But Black January, I think, is more refined than Red Equinox. And when I was working on what was more of a suspense crime thriller, Steel Breeze, I intentionally wanted the prose to be more stark and the pace to be very accelerated. So it'll depend on what my goals are for a story. Whether or not I'm always hitting them is open to debate. But I hope I'm getting better at it.
Have you ever written anything, say, in Black January or some of your earlier works that you just know is good? I mean, you sit there, you read it, and you go, wow, I just hit a home run with this particular chapter, these few pages, this scene.
It's rare, that something, when I've written it, that day, that moment will resonate in a way that I feel proud of. Often I need the objective distance of coming back to it later.
Okay.
And that can go two ways. You can be reading in a bookstore 6 months later and want to cut a word,
Doesn't that happen to all of us, though?
They're never,
Yeah.
they're never done. But
Well, how about reviews? Do you ever read reviews and the reviews are 5-star and they're glowing, and you say, "Wow, I got my point across," or I
it's awesome if a reader gets what you were trying to do. If they catch those things that you were hoping they would, or that they see what you were trying to do. That it's all about communication, and until you know that someone has received the signal and hopefully gotten out of it and every reader gets something different out of a book, which is great. It's a collaboration with the reader. But I think it's hard to just have the confidence to do this at all. So, it's easy to think that you shouldn't believe your 5-star reviews and that you should believe, your 2-star reviews. And I try not to believe either. The only way to keep doing this probably is to find the equilibrium of not taking either too seriously.
Yeah, you can get pretty depressed as well as pretty high reading these things. So,
Yep.
yeah, go ahead.
So on one level, Black January is cosmic horror and weird fiction, but it's also in some ways a haunted house story. What books influenced you in writing it, and what were some of your aims in combining those elements?
Okay, good question. I often will have a little list of books that I make when I'm starting to work on a new book of my own. Things that I want to, if I've read them already, that I want to revisit, because there was something about the flavor of them or the atmosphere that I'm hoping to kind of make a part of my own
That's an interesting statement.
my own environment while I'm trying to make my new thing out of these disparate elements. So in this case, yeah, it was a lot of haunted house fiction. Obviously, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson is the Mount Everest in that area. So I did read that again. The House of Leaves was a huge influence on Black January. I've got to give credit where it's due there. A very innovative book and a difficult book. I think that's a book that challenges the reader in so many ways. It tries to make the reader stop carrying on with this thing that is so tangential and is more than a book in many ways. So I wanted some of the fundamental concepts of House of Leaves, but in the context of a suspenseful, fast-paced thriller. So the idea of a house that changes its dimensions, that is unreliable, that's an influence there. Certainly Hell House by Richard Matheson, another one where there's a team of explorers trying to scientifically gauge the paranormal phenomena in a house that plays in. And of course Lovecraft, who I'm paying homage to again with Dreams in the Witch House, and even a novella called Lurker at the Threshold, which is really August Derleth taking a Lovecraft fragment and expanding on it. It's a little book that hooked me as a teenager, and now I don't connect with the language of it so much, but some of the ideas stayed with me. So those are all in there.
You've got time for one more question, so why don't you go ahead?
So, what do you think a review of Black January from Lovecraft would sound like?
It would be a 1-star, probably. It would be an abomination. 2-word review, right? I hope, when I wrote Red Equinox and wanted to play in Lovecraft's sandbox, which so many of his friends did when he was alive, and so many of us have done since, I had some goals that were to do with honoring what I love about Lovecraft, the cosmicism, the philosophy, the sense of a vast universe and man insignificant, the pantheon of gods and monsters that was so unique. I wanted to honor all of that, but in a way that was that had a more modern voice and that had a more modern cast of characters, that had a racially diverse cast of characters, an urban cast in modern Boston, a female protagonist, things that Lovecraft himself, he's rolling in his grave, when we do these things. I'm not the only one playing, very self-consciously with his mythology while also turning it on its head and kind of poking my thumb at at the racism that's so embedded in his work. So the interracial relationship, these things I'm sure would make him very uncomfortable, and I'm very happy about that.
Well, this has been a great interview. This is another one that I wish could go for another half hour.
Fun talking to you.
Yeah,
I hear we get to have tacos after.
We do, yes. But you're going to read for us.
All right.
Yeah.
So I've brought an excerpt from Black January. This is the scene where Becca Phillips first has a look at the Wade house, the setting for most of the book.
She's the lead.
She's the lead character from Red Equinox, returning in Book 2, Black January. She has been called back to Massachusetts by a government organization called Spectra. Well, I got the T-shirt. This is the Special Physics Emergent Counter-Terror Recon Agency. So this is it's got an X-Files kind of element to it. So they're this black op group that looks into cosmic incursions, things from other dimensions breaking into our world. In Red Equinox, after the climax of that, there was this residue from another dimension that has, in Black January, has been discovered as black snowflakes falling.
That sounds cool.
Around
very cool.
West of Boston, in Concord, Massachusetts, these are being drawn like iron filings to a magnet, and the magnet is this mansion called the Wade House. So Becca is being driven there by Agent Brooks of Spectra in this scene. Becca saw the black snowflakes swirling in the sky before the car took the bend at the base of the hill. She pressed her finger to the windshield and the condensation around it melted, but the flakes on the outside didn't. Soon they were accumulating. Aren't you going to turn on the wipers? Nah, we'll be there in a minute. The wipers just smear that shit around like ink. They turned onto a gravel road that wound up a terraced hill surrounded by threadbare woods. The ground appeared to be covered with a dusting of ash, in some places heaped in piles. The flakes swirled in eddies as the car passed. The base of the hill was wrapped in a 10-foot electrified fence topped with razor wire. Brooks took a holographic card from a clip on the visor, rolled the window down as the car rolled up to the guard booth, and passed the card to an armed security officer in gray fatigues with a Spectra shoulder patch. The guard examined the card, tilting it this way and that, and briefly holding it under a UV light before passing it back. He pressed his thumb onto a fingerprint reader and set the motorized gate trundling open on the side-rolling wheels. Becca noticed an assault rifle propped in the corner of the booth as they passed. A second guard with a matching rifle was stationed under a rain shelter inside the gate. Climbing the hill, the first structure to rise from the blackened landscape was a large corrugated Quonset hut. "What's that?" Becca asked. "We call it base camp." "Wow, do I get a Sherpa to carry my stuff?" "No, but you get your own bedroom in the mansion." "We're not sleeping in the hut?" "The hut is where you'll be briefed on the mission. It houses our support staff." "The house isn't big enough for them too?" "Oh, it's big enough. Take a look." The day had grown warmer, the shrouded silver sun drawing a curtain of mist from the marshy ground, but gazing up the slope at the Wade house, Becca felt cold even in the heated car. It loomed out of the fog like the prow of a black ship, and for a moment she felt as if she were in a lifeboat on a limitless sea, falling under the baleful shadow of a vessel that promised no shelter, only menace and terrors to make those of the deep a preferable refuge. "We're sleeping in that?" Brooks didn't answer. As they moved through the mist and came nearer the structure, the impression of a ship passed, and the house seemed to shift, as if turning to admire itself in a mirror from a different angle. Even though she knew it was the car that was turning, Becca stopped breathing for a second, sure that something grotesque would be revealed as the details emerged. The mossy foundation stones and the weathered textures of scalloped shingles, the ornate lace of the trim skirting the sloping mansard roof and towering turrets. She felt certain she was watching a living, breathing thing that had not been built, but had grown like a tumor from the earth, and now, having attained a dark sentience, was straining to mimic the shape of a house. It made her head ache to look at it. Regaining her breath, she looked away and focused on the gleaming metallic siding of the Quonset hut and the cars parked around it. The contrast was enough to make her stomach lurch, but it broke the spell, and she realized she had been thinking in mixed metaphors, trying to reconcile the Wade house into some category, when in fact it was a place beyond category and comparison. She settled her gaze on her hands, afraid that one more glance at what should be merely a slouching, many-winged mansion would instead reveal a glimpse of a cold-blooded predator costumed in the rotting lace, hoops, and straps of a Victorian gown. And if you want to hear more, I'll be at Water Street Books in Exeter.
That is excellent writing.
On the 28th.
I highlighted that as I read it because that was such beautiful, incredible,
excellent prose.
Thank
powerful
you, Sarah.
writing.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
highlighted
Yes.
that. I was like, wow.
Yeah. Excellent job.
Thank
That's,
you.
You
that's
really
beautiful.
are
Pleasure to
an
be here.
incredible
Yes.
writer, Doug.
Thanks, Sid.
Yeah, boy, we got to have you back.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah, we
if
do.
nothing else, just to read.
I know, yeah.
That was
Well,
excellent.
I'll be reading around, like I said, at Exeter, Water Street Books on the 28th. We're doing a big book release party. So
I'll be
I think
there,
there'll
yes.
be cupcakes
Yeah.
and probably Lovecraft Ale, Narragansett Lovecraft
Yeah,
beer.
you guys want to read
so
this
New
book.
Hampshire
Yeah.
horror fans, please come party with me.
Yeah, and it's a trilogy, so you're going to have to get all three.
Yeah.
If I write the third.
Yeah.
Thank you
I
so
expect
much
you
for
will, yeah.
stopping by.
Thank you for
Yes.
having me, guys.
Thank you.
Really.
Thank
It's
you.
fun to be here.
Oh, loved
Thanks,
having
Sid.
you. And we'll be back in a minute. We're back for the closeout. Wasn't that a show?
It was
Indeed,
a great
it's fantastic.
show.
Great
Yeah.
guests all around.
Trisha and Doug. I mean, that was really wonderful. And
We could have had each of them a solo for the whole hour.
that's what I was just going to say. I mean, I could have listened to both of them for another half hour.
Indeed.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll both come back on and in the future, and we can ask them more questions, obviously, but also listen to them read.
Indeed.
Definitely,
Yeah.
yeah.
You want to say something before we shut down?
Yes, the show before last. I couldn't make it because of Anthony's
Oh,
tooth.
his dental, yeah.
And so last time on the show, I called him a baby. Remember? And I told you guys
You
not
were
to
joking,
tell
though.
anyone.
You were joking, though.
I told you guys not to tell anyone, but apparently you did, because somehow he heard.
Phil called him.
I don't have his phone number. I'm sorry, it wasn't me.
No. So, in all seriousness, I went with him to another appointment, and the poor guy went through hell. He had a root canal, and it was torture. He was such a trooper. He was so brave. I just have to give him a shout out and tell him that I was, of course, kidding, and of course I love him. And
Now we know.
and you're not a baby. You're a
Watches
little
the
bit
show.
of a baby, but you know.
But not because of that, not because of his teeth.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you did great. You were a trooper. So.
Well, good for
Okay.
Anthony. I'm
Yeah.
glad he got through
Yeah,
this.
and it's pretty much all resolved almost at this
Good, good.
point. So yeah.
Well, Anthony, we hope you continue to have continued success with your teeth
Yeah.
and not need any more root
Teeth
canals anyways.
success.
Well, and
Yes.
we got to give him credit because it shows that he actually watches each Taco Society. He's a viewer because
'cause
otherwise
we
you
didn't
wouldn't
say
have known.
that.
Yeah. So, there you go.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Our next show will be fairly shortly, I want to say 2-3 weeks, and we'll have the New England Horror Writers Association in. 3 of their top members only, I think.
Yeah, the 3 folks that run it.
They run it, yeah. And they're going to be talking about their newest release called Wicked Witches. So hopefully you enjoyed this show, and we'll see you again soon.
Happy Halloween.
See ya.
Thanks, everybody.